Hello, patrons of the Muncie Public Library. Thank you for including me in your celebration of Women's Equality Day this year. My name is Christina Xydias. I'm a political science professor at Bucknell University in Lewisburg. Today I want to start by saying that the story of women's equality is a story that's both global and local at the same time. It's a story taking place in our families and in our households, in workplaces, in schools, in government offices, and other public settings all the time, here and elsewhere. And so it's in the context of this bigger claim, this bigger observation, right, that I'd like to make 3 points about women's equality in 2020, and also about our Centennial 100-year observance of the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The first point that I'd like to make is that the right to vote is a key form of expressing your preferences about decisions that affect all of us, and it's a key right to expression alongside other very important rights and liberties. 2, women, like every group who were historically not equal before the law, have experienced steps forward and backward in striving for equality. This has not been a straightforward process. Third, sex and gender are dimensions of who we are socially and politically, but other groups who we are members of are also part of whether and how we get to participate in politics equally, whether we have equal rights and liberties. So on this first point, we are celebrating the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution this year. This marks the end, 100 years, of not restricting voting rights on the basis of sex. Suffrage, or the legal right to select candidates for public office, is a key political right because it's the most direct way that communities hold their leaders and decision makers accountable for their actions and choices. But there are many rights and liberties alongside suffrage, alongside the right to vote, and many of these rights and liberties have also been restricted for women as a group. So when we talk about Women's Equality Day, we talk about women's equality on August 26th, we want to keep in mind that a full and equal citizen is somebody who has an array of political rights and civil liberties, and the right to vote is among those. Before and after the U.S. constitutional amendment that ended restrictions on voting rights on the basis of sex in 1920, women as a group had different, much quieter voices in the political process. And I'll offer 2 examples of this. Many people are surprised to learn that women could not get a credit card without a father or husband's permission until the 1974 Equal Credit Opportunity Act. That's a half century after the 19th Amendment. Another important economic right is called equal pay for equal work, that it is not okay to pay one employee less than another doing the same job just because of their gender. Or something about them as a person. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009 is key federal legislation about women's right to sue on the basis of, or sue for pay discrimination. That's 89 years after the 19th Amendment. And it's still the case in 2020 that women with the same qualifications in the same job are consistently paid less than men with the same qualifications in the same job. If you compare women and men overall, women are disproportionately in lower paying occupations, resulting in a 19% pay gap. And for a woman of color, you'll earn even less. Right? Equal rights to financial and economic independence are very political issues, all right, because they powerfully influence whether you can secure transportation to get and keep a job. Whether you can freely seek information that you need to make good choices for yourself in your life and at the ballot box, and whether you can choose to participate politically in your community in ways that take time and money. The second point that I'd like to make today is that expanding the rights of a group who were historically not equally free is a process that happens in fits and spurts. Sometimes it moves backwards. Women's Equality Day on the 26th of August celebrates that women in the United States cannot legally be fired when they become pregnant, just on that basis. Women's Equality Day celebrates that women can apply for a line of credit and the bank can't just say no because they say no to women. Women's Equality Day celebrates that women can run for office to be directly part of keeping our public resources in working order. But some of what we're celebrating now, women actually had in earlier periods in US history, then lost and then had to regain. In the early colonial periods, so here I'm talking about before the American Revolution, many women were business people in their communities. Laws that were brought to North America by British colonists technically banned women from a lot of occupations and from making financial transactions, but this was routinely ignored. Historians know that women's occupations, the jobs they held, were much less stereotyped and restricted in the 16 and 1700s compared to later centuries. So in this colonial period, women could write wills, they could own property. After 1776, however, courts and lawyers returned to applying these more restrictive rules about what occupations women could have and what kinds of legal and financial activities they could engage in. So women were banned from many occupations. They could not make financial choices as individuals. Married women in particular had very limited rights on a legal principle called coverture, by which their husbands were their legal guardians, right, acted for them, made their financial and legal choices. It took another couple of centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years, right, for women to get back to more open options. My last point is about how the story of women's rights is complicated because women are members of lots of different groups. Women are diverse. Many women are also members of other groups simultaneously struggling for equal rights and liberties, and these stories intersect. We're celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, but many women did not get to vote, did not get to use their political voices in the form of voting until the 1965 Voting Rights Act. If you were a woman of color in a state that restricted voting on racial lines in 1950, then it didn't matter that the 19th Amendment had been passed 30 years before. So we're celebrating the centennial of women voting now in 2020, but it's still the case that how much money you have raises or lowers the volume of your voice, your political voice. If you're a woman who has lots of money, you have a much louder voice and more influence in decisions that affect all of us than if you have a lot of bills and not a lot of money. And how much money you have is a question of women's equality for lots of reasons, as I've said. One of these reasons is that 80% of single parents are women. And more women than men have incomes that leave their households below the poverty line. So it's very important that voting is not restricted on the basis of sex anymore. But money still matters for whether and how you can get information that you need to decide how to vote. It matters for whether you can contribute to a political campaign through your time or with a donation. And that's a problem for everyone who's hurting financially, but it's especially a problem for women because of other patterns in our families and in our workplaces. In summer 2020, we are collectively experiencing a financial and social crisis related to COVID-19. The story of equal rights is complicated right now because women are more likely to be responsible for looking after children and other family members at a time when many schools and childcare facilities are closed. So a law may not prevent a woman from getting a job, from voting, but needing to be at home to look after children. In 2020, we are celebrating a centennial of the 19th Amendment. In a future year, we will celebrate all women in the United States being able to exercise the right to vote. So we have a lot to celebrate, but also a lot of work to do. If you're interested in learning more about these issues and related issues, please talk to your wonderful librarians at the public library, and they'll help you find books and other resources. Thank you again for including me.